And it's Anthony Albanese getting ready to sink the AUKUS nuclear submarine deal. Here was Labor's Foreign Minister or Foreign Affairs spokeswoman, she's the Shadow Minister, Penny Wong, yesterday.
In terms of the most recent diplomatic stoush, I hope that DFAT and the national security community do undertake an internal review about what has gone wrong in terms of the AUKUS announcement and the clear diplomatic problems with the French and some of the public statements of the Americans.
Today, Labor's Defence spokesman Brendan O'Connor got in on the action, claiming the Morrison government's plan to build a nuclear submarine fleet has no credibility, and calling for Australian industry to get a substantial slice of the project. For his reaction, I want to bring in the Australian's foreign editor, Greg Sheridan. He joins me now from Melbourne. Well, this is very interesting, Greg. Penny Wong yesterday, Brendan O'Connor today, and of course, Paul Keating is at the National Press Club tomorrow. He's not been happy about the submarine deal. Do you think Labor's having an each-way bet here on the nuclear submarines?
Peter, it's great to be with you and great to join you. Honestly, I think Labor has been perfectly okay on this. I've got no problem with them at all. I think the people who are sinking this deal is the government. Much more significant speech than Brendan O'Connor today was Melissa Price, the Defence Industry Minister, who said explicitly Labor is going to build this submarine in Adelaide. So she is also promising a high level of Australian industrial content. If we are planning to build nuclear submarines in Adelaide, that means we are not going to have them in a relevant timeframe. This is a science fiction commitment from the Morrison government, and the awkward and disobliging comments of the Biden administration look to me as though the Morrison government hasn't got all of its ducks in a row. The Morrison government has absolutely no communication strategy on this. The only information any of us can get are titbits which come out of Senate estimates. Thank God for Senate estimates. So the government's communication strategy is that occasionally a cornered admiral in an estimates committee will admit that we're not going to get a nuclear sub before 2040 at the earliest, and they're going to have to do 2 life of type extensions of the Collins sub. Meanwhile, they say they can't make the aid vessel in Australia that they promised they would because our shipyards are too busy. What are our shipyards doing? There are no subs, there are no frigates. The only naval shipbuilding project we have going at the moment is the offshore patrol vessels. I think, frankly, Peter, this is a joke. And I like the Morrison government and everything. They're good blokes. They're all friends of mine. But I'm not going to pay them on a promise. They're promising something in science fiction time and expecting us all to pat them on the back and say how great they are on national security.
There was a point made by Peter Jennings the other day that perhaps there's pressures on the submarine fleet build in the US. They're looking for another naval shipyard. Perhaps we should be approaching the US to put their naval shipyard here, align it with the Australian workforce, they've got all the expertise, and start building submarines, both for the Americans potentially, but certainly for Australia. Is that viable, or do we have to just accept we shouldn't be building them in Adelaide if we want them any time before, 2100 or something like that, that we should be building them in the United States, that we should be getting them as quick as we can, and perhaps even take them as a lease option?
Yeah, so Peter, if that were possible, that'd be great. There's no indication it's possible. To do that, you'd have to have very deep President-Prime Minister engagement. But, Morrison, who I think generally handles foreign affairs well, he was at the G20 and COP26 with Joe Biden. Biden didn't think it was worth having a meeting with him at either summit. Now, all this talk that, this AUKUS shows we've never been close to the Americans and everything. Well, John Howard was pretty close to the Americans, but it doesn't mean anything unless it delivers something. I think, obviously, we should simply try to get the subs built in America. Imagine the battle in Congress if they said they were going to take the build to Australia. Of course, it might happen if you had a magnificent president absolutely committed to it, but it's extremely unlikely. However, even building them in the US, at the moment, the US has no spare capacity and we have no capacity to operate them. It's even on the very best scenario, even if they decide to lease us one, they don't have any spares to lease at the moment. We don't have anyone to crew them. But even if somehow or other that happened, that's probably 7 to 10 years away, and that will give us one training boat. Now, we said in 2009 as a nation, we needed 12 regionally superior submarines by now. What we've got is 6 old age pension Collins-class submarines, which are about to go into their life of type extension, which will mean we have 5. Obviously, if you're going to do nuclear, they have to be built in America. But I still think we're going to have to do a conventional sub in the meantime. I think the government is really pulling the wool over the eyes of Australians on this. And they're just, if they really think they can do it earlier than 20 years, they should tell us how. If they really think they're not going to do it in Adelaide, they should be upfront and honest with Adelaide. Don't announce that after the election, announce it before the election. And if they really think they're going to do it in Adelaide, then they've got rocks in their head and they need to get on and build another conventional sub quickly. And if they don't want to build the French sub, obviously that's gone now, just build more Collins subs. But frankly, Peter, although I like Peter Dutton and I admire ScoMo and all the rest of it, this is as comprehensively an irresponsible approach to military preparedness as I've seen from any government in Australia.
And look, I just think it's criminal to keep running defence procurement policy through marginal seats in Adelaide. I'll call it what it is. That's where we got this mess in the first place. And you know, the rest of the country has a buy-in here about our national security and needing a submarine fleet, particularly given the region, that we shouldn't be held hostage for a few marginal seats in Adelaide. And I think that's where the government has got to be upfront and honest. I think they'd be rewarded in Adelaide for actually telling the truth on these sorts of issues, because we've had decades of that, the rubbish that's been happening down there on procurement. I want to move to another topic if I can. These satellite images out of northwestern China showing mock-ups of US Navy aircraft carriers and destroyers. The US Naval Institute says they're part of a target range set up by the People's Liberation Army. This looks like they mean business, Greg.
It sure does, Peter. Just a final thought on the subs in one more sentence. If Adelaide is an unbearable political problem for them, why don't they do the obvious and build a couple of more air warfare destroyers in Adelaide? It's Morrison and Dutton who are in government, not the Defence Department. They can overrule these buggers, build a whole lot of other ships in Adelaide and get the subs built overseas. But they won't do anything. They're paralysed. They'll do nothing except make announcements. On the Chinese, yeah, they are preparing for military engagement with the Americans to take Taiwan. And given how weak the Biden administration looks and that its key allies like Australia will be in a position to make zero contribution at all, you wouldn't be surprised if they were making very serious calculations right now. Now, that doesn't guarantee they're going to take action or anything. I mean, on balance, I still think probably they won't. But they, unlike us, they have a purpose in their defence policy. Unlike us, they have a discipline about their defence procurement. Unlike us, they get capabilities which are relevant to their national security needs. And that is tremendously dangerous for the Americans, for the Taiwanese, and of course for us, more than for anyone except perhaps the Taiwanese.
Well, we know 20 Chinese fighter jets breached Taiwanese airspace yesterday. 140, 150 odd last 4 days. This escalation, is it, Greg?
Yes, it is an escalation. And they're trying to intimidate Taiwan into some kind of capitulation before, without having to fire a shot. And that capitulation needn't be total surrender, but it could be some sort of confederation arrangement or something with China acknowledging Beijing's sovereignty. I don't think Taiwan is going to do that. The other thing, of course, is the more they constrain Taiwan militarily, when they do break out and decide to take military action, you won't know until it's too late, because it'll seem like, a real military action will start out just like one of these exercises of breaching Taiwanese airspace. And of course, there's an arrogance and impunity about it. They're saying to the Taiwanese, look, these Americans are feeble. They can't do anything to constrain us. They can't do anything. And no one else is worth worrying about. Now, I think the Japanese are formidable, but certainly if the only thing that stood between the Taiwanese and Chinese domination was our military capabilities, you'd be ordering surrender pretty quickly. But the Chinese are careful in their calculations. I don't think they'll take an extravagant risk. But you must say, our pathetic incompetence combined with Biden's weakness is surely the things which are most encouraging the Chinese to take action in the next 5 years.
And this is the real stuff that matters, not all the other obsessions we've got running in most of the headlines on news right around the country. I tell you what, Greg, thank you for some common sense and reorientating us to where the real fight is. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Peter.